So, welcome back, everyone. We're joined again by Armunn. How are you doing, Armunn?
All good here, yeah. Flowers blooming, bees are around, and all the birds are chirping.
Well, that's the best weather to be looking into this sort of surreal landscape of the post-apocalyptic world that is iPet Goat 2. So let's get on with it, I guess. Yeah, we're as we say, episode 7 of 666. Yeah.
Yes, well, either 33 or 666. One of the two
Yes.
will have to be.
If we pass 33, then we'll just do maybe 10-second episodes until we'll string out to 666.
We'll splice the the full videos into smaller parts to make up 666. Yeah.
Exactly, man. Right, I think we left off here, so we'll take it from here, and then just tell me when you want me to stop it.
What, you don't have notes this time around?
I do actually have notes. I've put together some notes. There is one part of this that I'm going to have to put together some serious amounts of notes because there's a lot of quotes that go with the concept. So, and I can't quite recall even the paraphrases of the quotes. So, but we're not at that stage yet. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll play it.
Can you pause there? Sorry, a bit back. You remember all that? There was a thing in social media about the black-eyed kid. I don't know if you remember that.
Even the black-eyed cult as well.
Yes,
yeah.
And it's the right eye, as you can see, which in your perspective, it has to do with the spiritual blindness, right? According to what you've said before.
Yes, but spiritual blindness. Yeah. So the idea is the bruised right eye would be spiritual involution, and of course this leads to conscious evolution, which is what we're seeing throughout this alchemical great work of the soul.
Yeah. Well, what is your first intuitive and second your notes related comments regarding this particular image of the kid who was sort of heavily wounded, all bandaged with blood and so on, the right eye blackened or painted. It could also be painted with that strange symbol in gold or a sort of light yellow over it. So what is your intuitive reading and also your notes, the notes that you collected about that? Because I know you like that.
Well, I'll do my intuitive reading, then I'll have to sort of go through the notes that I have here. But after you've made your comment, but the first thing to mention is what you see is what's called the Pieta, and I forget which Renaissance artist developed this. I think it was Michelangelo, actually. It was pretty early on in his career as an artist, and he developed this Pieta, and the Pieta is effectively Jesus Christ held in the arms of Mother Mary, of course, after the crucifixion. It's something along those lines.
Just a small comment there. It's pietà, and that means mercy in translated. So go ahead.
Well, what's interesting about that as well is that that sort of pronunciation is very close. So you saw the mushroom cloud, and I actually had to look this up. I'm going to have to look it up again, funnily enough. But you have the mushroom cloud in the back, but the Hebrew for mushroom is pitria, which is I found that interesting. Again, I don't know really the connection that we could make there, but I think it's further indicating this idea of the, as you said, the pietà. I'm an uncultured Scot, so my pronunciation is absolutely pathetic when it comes to Romance languages. But Yeah, so this is the Horus. It's the dead child. And of course, as we see, if the bruised eye, it is our own soul, which is in this state of spiritual involution. It is bandaged. It is it's laid bare. It's bloodied, and of course, Sophia, or the divine feminine, that which is an inextricable part of our pneuma, our spirit, that which gave birth to us. Um, and of course, we are within our fallen state. She sits there and weeps for us, to see if we will, again, like the mummy you see here, and you saw previously as well, the opening of the mouth ritual, which of course was another Egyptian ritual related to resurrection. So she's waiting to see if he will be resurrected from this malaise, from this great work as well, right? Because as we see, and as I'll just take it back, um, something to mention on the gold, just before I go away from this, something to mention on the scarab. So the scarab is the, again, back to Egyptian or ancient Egyptian Kemetic folklore and mythology. The scarab is the symbol of eternality. It is the symbol of this sort of, similar to our butterfly, which, it goes through this cycle of this eternal cycle of not expending, but devouring the waste to thus grow. And this is what you see of the scarab. This is, of course, why it was so heavily used by the ancient Egyptians, because the ancient Egyptian religion was effectively, as we would know it, Gnostic. It had this belief that the world in which we dwell is a prison for the soul, in which we must be released from, and all of this, right?
Either that, or ancient Egyptians were created in modern times to legitimize that thought, which has, as we discussed in that live, I think it was last year or something, with Bach, about
Oh yes, yes.
the fakery of ancient Egypt, which was what basically the conclusion we drew from, was that it was a concocted story to legitimize and give like an ancient, like as if this idea was very ancient in a continuous timeline. I'm not saying it can't be ancient. It depends on what we consider ancient, but it's not continuous. It's not like a continuous timeline from Egypt all the way up to here. I think that civilization goes through implementations of blueprints, a cycle that begins, a cycle that ends, a cycle of alpha, a period of alpha, period of omega, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
it could also be that ancient Egypt is not ancient in the way it is conceived to be. But sorry, that was just a.
Well, it's similar to the discussions we've had in the past regarding the potential and authenticity of the Nag Hammadi scrolls and
Yes,
such.
yes.
Again, where Gnosticism itself, or what we glean as Gnosticism, even derives from. But the gold dot as well there is it's the flame imperishable. It's this, like what we've seen previously with the sort of sigil that surrounded, or the sign, the circular solar sign that surrounded that of Lily, or
Mm.
Erica Kirk, or whatever term we want to use. Alice as well is another term I've heard bandied about. She sits there within the solar circle, which is the cycle of the soul on Earth, and then right outside of that you have the dot, this gold dot, this point without a place, right? This is the esoteric sun. Some know it as Sirius. In fact, many know it as Sirius within the esoteric traditions when it goes towards astro esotericism, I guess you would call it.
Mhm.
And what this symbolizes is effectively the divine spark within us. It's this thing that really is, in fact, beyond the ego itself. It comes from that primordial place of silence and profundity of Sige and Bythos. And so this is what you're seeing here symbolized, right? That within the scarab, the hard shell of the vessel, this vessel that sort of devours the waste to thus grow spiritually. And again, these are all very Masonic ideas hidden within the Ordo, the idea of Ordo ab Chao, Solve et Coagula, so on and so forth. Igni natura renovata integra, INRI, through fire is the earth reborn whole. All of this. Fundamentally, that what it's showing is that there's the potential that this lifeless child, which is the extinguished spark of the, let's say, consumer, of the the zoom consume, the normative individual of the masses, that he will eventually awaken from this malaise, come, of course, the sort of alchemical ritual that you see just prior to this, and also through the various stages of the magnum opus. In fact, we see it if I pull it further back. So you actually see there the Rubeda. You see the Citrinitas, as we are mentioning, with the mushroom and its Hebrew pronunciation, and that bears a striking resemblance phonetically to the Pietà. And then, of course, you have the purple vial, which the purple is beyond. It is that color beyond. It's the Anja chakra, I do believe, the highest or seventh chakra.
The crown.
You have the crown, exactly. And then you have the white of the Albeda, and then, of course, the black of the Negredo, the putrefaction. There's more we could say on this, but I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, well, that's a good interpretation, yes. I would say that what I see there intuitively is the child is the mind character that the ego would generate organically, that was beaten down into a deep sleep, let's say, due to first the external format, let's say the external pressure of formatting a mind character into a specific mode, a specific, framing. So what is acceptable and what isn't, which makes, of course, the mind character reject itself and beat itself psychologically and internally, become wounded to the point of exhaustion and of falling into a deep sleep. But that child, which is basically the you that you are supposed to be, let's call it like this, never really dies. It can be beaten, it can be in deep sleep, but never really dies. And I think that figure crying and holding, let's say, the child, is exactly the ego / the connection already to the essence. So the potential behind the manifestation of the child, basically holding and waiting for the right time for the child to quote unquote resurrect. Of course, it's not dead, therefore it's not an actual resurrection, but it is perceived as a resurrection because it comes out of nowhere, given that it's not visible, right? So it is basically, in my intuitive reading, it is basically the what we should have been and would have been were it not for all the formatting and programming and quote unquote psychological beaten up beatings that we took as we grew up, but that if the alignment again to that individuality, to that let's say, like you said, the core being, the essential being is established, then it will resurrect who you should be, right? And the wounded comes back to life. Yes, like I stated in my book, and I think that again, Jesus was a figure, a mythological figure, a symbolic figure to stand in for the ego. That is my opinion. And he resurrected too, right? The idea was that, yes, he was beaten down and betrayed and this and that, but at the correct conjunction, when the alignment with the Father was there, he resurrected. So the same with, even in the Egyptians that you mention a lot, the same thing happened with Osiris. In that case, it was Isis that put him back together, with the exception of a particular part, right? But so I think that the idea here is the same: is that you are born whole, right? You are born with. That's why I'm against, the idea of evolution. You are born whole as you are. The thing is, instead of manifesting as you should be, let's say, as you are intended to be, let's put it like this, you are formatted into a pre-existing society that you're born into, right? A cultural context, religious, whatever it is, belief systems, etc. And so that has to, the only way is for you to reject yourself, right? And through the projection of shadows, through of that rejection and the reflection back, there will be a beating, there will be a wounding of that potential mind character down into virtually disappearing. But in fact, it never dies. And so I think that the resurrection concept comes from that, in my opinion.
Oh no, absolutely, yeah. There was something I had here regarding this sort of this trinity of the magnum opus. Now there are 4 stages to that magnum opus, but really Citrinitas and Rubeda are pretty much synonymous with one another, because Citrinitas is described, at least in Rosicrucian terms, and also the Rosarium Philosophorum, the Rosary of the Philosophers. It states that it is the immediate stage right before Rubeda, or the reddening, the red dawn, the like what you're saying, the rebirth of the whole, the rebirth of the gold from the aqua regia, from the acidic solvent, the final solvent, the final sort of gauntlet it has to run. And so, yeah, jump on.
I'm sorry, just something really quick, because I forgot to mention about the beetle. The beetle is, and that particular beetle is an animal that relies, or its function is decomposition, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
it is a collector of decomposed material, and or it helps decompose material. So it is a symbol here that it's through the decomposition that this child that never died will arise again. And that decomposition comes exactly from the reflected shadows. Because of the rejection that it was imposed on the early stages of life, a mask was put up, and that mask will eventually decompose, right? It will rot. It will become, unbearable, and will simply rot away and pass with time, if, of course, it's allowed to be. And again, we're talking about the idea of someone realigning themselves with the individuality, right? So after the decomposition, which you could also call the negredo, right? So after the decomposition, then the process of rebirth, or in this case, resurrection, can occur. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to
Oh
put
no,
that
you're
in. Because, yeah.
absolutely spot on. Yeah, so it relates to that Bataillean or Landian idea of the solar excess requiring expenditure, the
Mm.
expenditure through waste. Again, that's a very materialistic view of it, but it's the idea that you have to take the punches to really realize the inner strength that's within you. And you see the same thing, for example, right? I mean, this is, you've brought the scarab. Funnily enough, it rolls. I don't mean to be disgusting here, but it rolls the dung into a sphere, almost perfect spheres. Uh, at least from what I've seen on nature documentaries. So it's almost, again, when you link it, I don't know if you noticed here, but it's almost like Botticelli's Birth of
Mm.
Venus here. You have
Yeah. Mm.
this sort of clam or oyster that she's, the shell that she's sitting in. It's almost, again, similar to that idea that the world is your oyster, right?
Hmm.
And what does the oyster produce? Well, from the dirt and decay and the grime
Right.
that finds its way into, that infiltrates the mouth of the oyster and sits there and gestates within the dark, similar to, of course, the child gestating within the womb of the mother, that it eventually will produce the glistening, almost ethereal and divine divine pearl.
Pearl. Yeah.
So this is the idea of grace. And this is the same thing, of course, you see similarly with the rolling into a spherical ball, this this heap of decomposition. So he creates order from the waste of chaos. So it's interesting looking at these symbols, because fundamentally this is why they were utilized. It's why they were utilized by the ancient Egyptians, the Kemetic civilization. It's why it's utilized by all of these various ideologies or philosophies or mystery schools of thought, because fundamentally they're using them as analogies. They're literal representational analogies. We've taken the world, we've turned them into subjective vehicles for us to both comprehend and perhaps in some sort of multifaceted, not necessarily a direct way, because you can't do that with the objective or God. It's to describe these things, it's to describe the objective, it's to describe God. Again, not pinpoint accurate coordinates conceptually of what these things are, but a general understanding that that's felt deep within our own soul, to what the immutable part of us is screaming out.
Yes, it's that discussion that we've been having with that commenter, Saturn Rooster, about it's of course Saturn Rooster and other commenters as well, that of course when you speak about the concepts, you are not taking those concepts as absolutes. And that is exactly the warning that we have been reiterating time and time again, is that when the concept becomes the absolute, and of course that conversation started with numbers and words and so on, but it's also for this, like archetypes and symbols and so on. When those symbols become the absolute, then you're lost. Right. The idea is, it's like a language. I'm speaking words right now so that I can convey a message to you and to the listeners, but that doesn't mean that the words are absolute. The words don't exist per se in nature. It's an agreement. And you have to understand the language I'm talking, English in this case, to get any idea of what I'm talking about, right? Of what I want to convey. So it is the same thing that we're dealing with here. When you mentioned that distinction, it is that when we address concepts, we are not taking them as absolute. And of course, a symbol can be read 1,000 different ways, right? In the same way that a word can be ambiguous. But what we're trying to grasp here is, okay, with this set of symbols that was placed here by this animation, what may lie in our intuitive view may lie beyond the interpretation and the established meanings of these symbols, right?
Well, here as well, somebody mentioned that all of this was just merely subjective. I mean, of course, it's laughable considering what symbolism is, but like what we're stating here, even language itself, anything that mankind is viewing within the world, fundamentally, it's only viewing it within its own mind. So it's not necessarily that our eyes are windows, but they are mirrors themselves.
Yes.
Again, if we just fully understand that, or we fully crystallize in our minds that what we're viewing is the absolute. There is nothing beyond it. This is, of course, why modern science or really any materialist ideology or materialist methodology or epistemic, eventually it will reach a plateau, because fundamentally there is something that lies beyond this space of the subjective. There's something else that lies there
Yeah.
that really can only be accessed vis-a-vis certain things. One of those is symbolism, right? It's a higher form of language because it's closer to the thought prior to its filtration vis-a-vis the mind, hormones, the nervous system, words, what have you. So there's a quantization that occurs within the mind when we have that initial spark of the thought, and this is what symbolism is trying to bridge and to cut down, so we can see not necessarily we're not going to unveil the sciatic Isis, if you will, the grand mystery of it all, but we'll gain a better understanding of its form behind that veil. So this is what Louis Lefebvre stated. This is from webneil.com. It's retrieved by on the year was 2026. The 1st of July, this was retrieved. So, quote, I had always been interested in spiritual traditions and philosophies, and it's as if I felt that I would find some sort of resolve in this exploration of my internal landscape using all these universal symbols. I felt that I would be led to a deeper peace. Throughout the process, I tried not to let my intellect get in the way, choosing to let the images pass through me even if I didn't fully understand them on a conscious level, rather than censoring everything, even if I was a bit shocked by some of the imagery. I followed the story in its visual form. When things made sense visually and rhythmically, I went with that. In the course of doing this work, I have found many explanations for all the micro stories, and I have had many other people give me various other explanations. I think it works well that way, evoking different things for different people. So, quite literally, he's stating there, he's inviting you to almost not necessarily even take the universal symbols and their even historical definitions, but to view them as a canvas by which, again, as he did, using the symbols to evoke your own soul, to get beyond the subject of the mind. And this is what I don't think people are fully aware of the power of symbols in that respect. They're not just to convey necessarily a message, but they're to convey a meaning, or even the sort of the kernel of meaning itself. And that's what I think a lot of people are missing when they look at, for example, iPet Go 2. Of course, I mean, we can discuss here all of the symbols, what they mean to us, what they, and of course, by what they mean to us and our conveyance of that, we get a general idea of perhaps the ontology, epistemology that we're working with. We understand the limitations of the human mind and such. But there's a deeper meaning found within these symbolic, the exploration or analysis of symbolism that really can't even be quantified into word. It can't be quantified even into this video. It's beyond all of that.
And I see, and of course he said that, and we'll take it as it is, from his words. But I am of the opinion that he didn't do this in a mere moment of inspiration. I think that this was, or at least a big chunk of this animation was taken from a script that he doesn't need to even be aware of in its entirety, but that he was given to convey, like I said, preview of some of the following narrative points. So I think that it wasn't entirely that way, and of course, when these symbols are used, the symbols themselves have a certain pull into our psyche, right? And that pull can then bring us into a state of, yes, oh, this guy discovered this or discovered that, and there's some truth, inner deep truth here hidden. Yeah, you can find the truth because, like you've said, the eyes are mirrors. They're not windows, right? He's not conveying anything to you, but you can reveal to yourself through your own mirror, and through watching this or whatever it is, you can find a way back to your own ego's interpretation, let's say your own individuality, reclaim that. But I don't think that the intention externally from this author was entirely that. Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, there are very strange connections to the geopolitical ongoings right now. I will say that as well. But there's a part of me that perhaps suspects that, I don't know, call it what you will, maybe channeling or something. When you're unconsciously creating these sort of artistic pieces, it's similar to, of course, dreams. People have had strange predictive dreams, right? Um, I had one recently. It wasn't necessarily predictive, but for me, I believe it opened up, a sort of not necessarily a treasure trove of understanding, but it opened, it widened my horizons on certain key concepts. I
Mhm.
think people may do this unconsciously. Again, it's almost like it's the soul coming out of oneself, and the soul itself
Yes.
is perhaps beyond time and space. But yes, I mean, we do have to bear that in mind. Perhaps what he's telling us is totally false, and it does seem, and I mean, one could quite rightly argue that there's a deeper geopolitical meaning behind this. There's a deeper eschatological meaning behind all of this, and when you realize geopolitics is fundamentally structured around eschatology, it's almost a theater
Yes.
for it, then it makes total sense.
And in the West, it is an eschatology that follows a pre-written script called the Book of Revelation. And whether you take the Book of Revelation to be, legitimately ancient and written by the hands of this or that, or if you take it as, a more recent script, it's not important because that is what's being followed, right? And so that is the pull, let's say, that was pre-programmed to be triggered at these times, right? And I know that there are currents that said what the Book of Revelation speaks of a time that already passed, and it's an historical record, yes, but of a past, something that already happened, and so it has no bearing in the present or the future. Even if you take it like that, even if we were to take it like that, it's nonetheless being used as the script for the theater now. My opinion is that no, it's not from the past. It's not from anywhere. It may have been applied several times before in different cycles and different blueprints, but it is nonetheless important to understand, in my opinion, its connection, the pool it's the pool that they draw from to establish this performance. And this performance is eschatological, like you said.
Absolutely, and because the eschatology becomes a hyperstition, once enough people believe in it, at least literally. Of course, even beyond the literal, if you look at the elite or the ruling class themselves, they believe in this. There's a certain literalism to it, but their literalism is based around mystery cults. So all of this really is to reinforce this self-fulfilling prophecy. And fundamentally, that's the engine of history. It's the direction of history itself, and that is pulled by, again, as we were mentioning, the simple idea, right, of these biocompatible archetypes, such as, for example, the savior, and so or of course of judgment itself, right? So the savior comes after the judgment, and all of these ideas. Um, so really, all of it is, I mean, it's informational warfare. It's informational warfare because you can see it. I mean, even the superficial elements of it scream out that it's informational warfare. Why? Because it's trying to mentally terraform your mind to get
Correct.
you to conform to certain behavioral patterns and conform to certain time-related patterns as well, sort of constraints, time constraints as well.
And also conform to certain processes as if they were entirely organic, right? This has to be, this has to occur, this has to, it's part of nature that this happens, right? And so one of the aspects that I think we've discussed in previous conversation, I'm not sure if we did in this series, but doesn't matter, is the idea that the scripts try to mimic what is observed in nature, right? And the idea behind that is that if you are able to copy things that you observe in nature and put them into an artificial context, they become far more believable, right? If you put a TV in front of a dog with a piece of meat on the screen, the dog may tend to try to bite that meat on the screen, right? Because it resembles something that he organically and instinctively identifies as food, right? So in the same manner, this tries to mimic certain things that are perfectly organic, but we must be aware and take care that it's like a symbol that tries to make itself absolute, as we were talking before, and it isn't absolute. Well, I am not denying that there are forces behind that promote organic cycles. We've talked about this in the past, but these are not organic. What we're seeing here, the geopolitics, all of this is not organic. And one of the things that I find most, funny, ironic, is for example, when we hear an astrologer, and as you know, I'm doing an astrology series with Noble. An astrologer give an example of a certain astrological cycle with geopolitical content, I immediately laugh because it's the other way around. The geopolitical doesn't happen because of the natural cycle. The geopolitical mimics the natural cycle to give itself legitimacy because we sense we are connected to these organic cycles, these forces, right? Beyond the symbols and the concepts, we are connected to them, right? So our identification with the artificial comes from when we confuse what is in front of our quote unquote eyes, because it's not really our eyes that's seeing, right? It's a perception veil, a lens that changes the color of things. And when we look at them, we think, oh, here it is. Oh, I was almost expecting this. Yes, this makes sense. No, it makes sense because it copies what you were expecting intuitively, right? And we need to pay attention. And the way to pay attention to that is, like I said, stop talking to yourself and saying that this is a time of this is a time of that. No, just stop talking and listen instead within yourself, and you will distinguish these two. Sorry,
Well, it's interesting because throughout all of the various religions, and I think we can say as a sort of pithy statement that religions themselves are put in place to impede mankind from having a
yes,
direct connection with God. I mean, this is
yes,
the irony of religions themselves.
100%. Yes,
And like what you're saying, all of it is a mimicry. It's a pure imitation, a simulacra. So, for example, let's take the Assyrian triad, right? We have the death, the mourning, the rebirth. You're seeing that within here. So you have Osiris, which is indicative temporally of the old order, right? It's the dead child. This is the murdered god of the underworld. He is the representation of the old world that has been slain by the forces of chaos and severe judgment, and of course, just general exhaustion, right? The expenditure of waste. And then we have Isis, which is the grieving mother, as you see here, the Pieta, the mercy, the divine feminine who wanders the earth in deep mourning, gathering the broken pieces of her husband to magically conceive the divine successor. So she is the, and I've put here, though again, it's not necessarily a one-to-one comparison, but she is the precise Egyptian parallel to the exiled Shekinah weeping in the dust of Galut, which is the process of exile. And so the belief is that, in Kabbalah at least, is that when the Jews were, after 70 AD, when the Jews were pushed out, the Second Temple was destroyed, and they went on this exodus as a diaspora, that Shekinah was with them, and Shekinah is this divine feminine. It's that which must, at the end of time, after the tikkun, the rectification, or at least it's part of it symbolically, that she must be paired up once again with the bridegroom, the Zeir Anpin, or really just Yahweh, the sort of material, or I guess you would call it the sort of psychic manifestation of Yahweh in the Zeir Anpin. And so
Right.
this is the idea. She must be, as you see here, she's got her eyes closed. She must be awakened, right? And then we go into Horus. So he's the resurrected son, the Aeon, the golden child conceived from death. He is the avenger who battles the forces of chaos or Set to reclaim the throne and establish a new world order. The figure upon the Anubis boat, of course, could be encoded as this specific archetype as well. And remember, too, I believe it was Set that turned into a boar. And this connects to Epstein. I'll mention this quickly too, but just after this, he gored out the eye of Horus, I do believe. So this is what you're seeing here too, right? It's the Set is almost a psychopomp character. He's like the vessel guiding, or the Anubis figure as well. He's guiding mankind on this, as we see in this film, purely just this film, on this psycho-spiritual journey to into conscious evolution, right, into the new Aeon. But the reason it links with Epstein is because, firstly, Epstein's island of what was it, Little Saint James, which James is, of course, the English for Jacob. Jacob itself means the heel grabber. So you have the idea of the Ouroboros, and with the Esau and Jacob sort of the story, that fable. So that's contained there. The heel, the head is grabbing the heel constantly, right? And then of course Esau is grabbing the head of Jacob, and so on and so forth. And this has been like this from the womb. Again, these are all these are mythopoetic stories discussing man's own sort of psycho-spiritual nature. Do you want to jump in?
And then you have Siegfried and Achilles that were held by the heel to be made immortal, but only the heel was left out of the dragon's blood, or the So it's but when one thing that you mentioned there that I thought was of particular importance was that the divine feminine is looking to reconstitute, let's say, the fallen husband, whatever you want to call it, and that would be this artificial, and correct me if I'm wrong by saying this artificial concept of the masculine, right? And we must understand that that is happening inside of us. There is a part of us that is looking for the lost masculine, let's say, the lost consciousness, right?
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail, if you like, although the Holy Grail is more associated with the feminine, but nonetheless. So it is looking for, you could even say, if you want to do the masculine, it's looking for the Excalibur, right? And that gives kingship. That if inside of us we take this external artificiality of concepts and symbols as absolutes instead of mere mirrors and representations of what we have inside already, then we will truly, quote unquote, marry the internal feminine with this artificial masculine and give continuation to the cycle again, and become, let's say, the constructors of the new mask of the same artificial perception-based system, right? However, if we are able to take the symbol merely as a guidance, right, as a parable, and find the path, the internal path, individual path, only each individual can find it. No one can do it for you. Of that reconstitution, then the result is quite different, right? And that is where the loss of fuel occurs. And this is why I think that there's this double edge when they use the symbols, because they know that the symbol can be treated internally, and can have an unpredictable, unexpected effect. And that's why they also flood the academia sphere with established interpretations of these symbols to make sure that people are directed towards these interpretations and therefore look outside, look externally, instead of coming up with their own interpretations. Because, like you've well stated, and I think that should be the sentence that defines this episode. So do a note there, and my suggestion is make this the title of this episode, which is eyes are mirrors, not windows, right? So yeah.
Well, you're totally correct, and as well, harkening back to your point on this, this is actually intending to perpetuate the cycles of this of power. Let's just call it power. Aeon after aeon, epoch after epoch, again, is some sort of like undead host, if you will. And the reason we can see that is because it's trying to wedge this entirely artificial thing into the language of the natural. So, for example, the mother, the father, the child, all of these ideas, even the concepts of gold, silver, lead, it's trying to show, look, you can see it throughout the world. Power just is. These cycles that just are, right? We are etched into the very fabric of reality itself. And this is the game that they play, because they want you to believe, let's take any religion, for example. They want you to believe that this one book, which, by the way, most of these various sacred tomes, and I don't say this to be, flippant or to disregard anyone's faith. It's perfectly fine to have faith, but I'm just critiquing the sort of literature here. These sacred tomes have a cacophony, a multitudinous amount of contradictions within them. So they're so self-contradictory that it would appear that they are, God forbid, no pun intended, written by man himself, right? But then you have the idea, well, they're inspired by God. Okay, fine. But then you look into it, and really everything you're finding within these sacred tomes, most of it's symbolism. But the problem is there appears to be sort of a compartmentalization within every single religion. So the priest class realize it's all hogwash, right? And fundamentally, they view these things as mere metaphorical symbols, right? But of course, they will never say that to the laity, because the majority they actually can't live in the realm of ideas. They have to live in the realm of pure literalism, right? They can't dwell in not abstractionism, but this sort of the symbolic space where you understand that there are limitations to your own thinking. There's limitations to your own perception. That the perception itself, if you don't necessarily control it well, and you don't go into it with a very neutral and impartial approach, that it itself may ensnare you. It will constrict you like the serpent, right? And so most people can't dwell in that space, and that's really the problem of
Yeah.
most of mankind, probably from time immemorial. And it's the reason civilization as a model has continued incessantly, even after all of the abuses it's you know sort of burdened mankind with.
Hmm.
It's because mankind, civilization is the vehicle. It's the literal distillation of this view that the eyes are windows, that the eyes are not just mirrors. And
Yes, and
yeah,
they know it's BS, but still, they also know that they have to copy and mimic the organic. Otherwise, it doesn't have a pull, right? And this again, I reiterate that point. The distinction has to be made. It's not like you shouldn't read the Bible or the whatever holy book, the Quran or even the Nag Hammadi, right? It's not that you shouldn't. Oh, avoid it because it's the devil. you know, no. It's that when you read it, you have to have the individual discernment that can only come from the ego. Otherwise, it becomes programming. You understand? So it's use your eyes knowingly that they are mirrors, right? Not that they are windows. You don't think that you are receiving something external, right? It's like that other um, comment section that was there about the symbols or something like the symbols were created by man, right? And therefore they are illusions because man is an illusion, something like that. But then, of course, the inference is because only God exists and only God is truth. And then, of course, the obvious inference is, all right, but then who created the illusions? If it wasn't God and everything stems from God, the illusions were created by something God created. And therefore, indirectly, God created the illusions too, right? So instead of seeing this as a battle, right? A battle, like, oh, they're trying to do this and they're trying to do that. Yes, that is a perception. That is a bellic perception. And they want people in a bellic mode, in an us versus them mentality, right? Instead of doing that, understand this as basically a test. And when I'm saying a test, I'm not talking about judgment per se. I'm saying a test to your own individuality, right? Can you see through? Can you find your way through the maze? This perception maze, merely perception, because all you need to do is, just be quiet and it all changes. The walls disappear. You understand? So, yeah, well, I just wanted to drop that. I'll stop here. Otherwise, we'll have another hour and a half of just this scene. But I
yeah.
wanted to put that point out there. So
Well, I'll mention just really. I mean, that is even the idea of God as we view him.
sure, sure,
Um,
sure,
even
sure.
that is again a mirror
Sure, but
because
I
it's
was I was just
representational.
taking that as a principle, right? So what
Yes.
was
Yeah.
presented was, oh, okay, God created. Okay, but if God created and something works against God, then God also created that something that works against him, and therefore he created his own ad- adversary. And if everything is God's will and God is omniscient,
Mhm.
then he knew what he was doing, and he was doing it for a purpose, right? So as you can
Yeah.
see, that was the point. But sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, no, absolutely. No, I'm just I was sort of thinking along that other thread of concepts and abstractions and representational consciousness. But something else we could mention just from my notes here. Um, so firstly, yeah, the mutilation of the eye. So during the epic mythological, well, by the way, I was going to mention about Epstein, the connection there. So again, Set turned into a boar, if I do recall. Epstein or Epstein from German means white. Well, Ep is a wild boar, It can also mean a pig as well, but that's less used. Ape is a wild boar in German, and of course Stein is the stone. The stone has its own connotations. This idea of well, what we're seeing here, the crystallization of the soul within the material vessel. Of course, in masonry, that is jagged until it is hewn by the tools of the compass and the square, and it's measured out. And of course, that then is elevated, as you see within the alchemical magnum opus, that sign, with the triangle, it's the circle, the square, the triangle inside that, and then another smaller circle. It's the idea of as above, so below, but it's also the idea of this alchemical magnum opus of the cycles, which is that God breaks himself down into the representational image, the image of God, which is man. That itself then comes to understand itself through, as the mysteries would call it, technology, or it comes to understand itself through introspection, which would be a more Gnostic or Cathar view, or of course an even Buddhist view. And eventually it goes through this transmutation, which is typically violent. It's a violent transmutation. Then once, of course, the waters are shaken by the tempest, then the gentle waves shall carry on to the shores, as we see here, the birth of a new Venus. Venus is this morning and evening star. It is this, again, I think we stated it in the previous episode, the idea of the conjunction cycles of Venus over that 8 year. Yeah. So that itself is interrelated to the form of man. Again, as we've stated with the divine feminine, it's also related to the soul. It's basically the soul. It's the part of the soul that, yes, it's fallen, it's contained within the vessel, but it is unknown to man. It's the sciatic Isis. No man hath seen her naked, right? And no man ever will, because to see her naked is to really go beyond the negational state of existence itself. And again, that even the concept of existence would take us on to another tangent here, but I won't go there. So Horus engages in a brutal conflict with Set, the god of the desert, storms, chaos, and the murderer of Osiris. And also the island of Little St. James is in the shape of Set's head, the sort of jackal head of Set. It's another animal, I forget now what it's called, but it's this sort of hybrid chimera animal. It's in that shape, and also the greater St. James is in the shape of a goat, interestingly. Anyway, Set represents the ultimate force of opposition and destruction, but of a necessary one, as opposed to a Pep, which is a primordial, all-encompassing chaos and destruction. So this is the Egyptian equivalent of the Sitra Akra, or the other side, or Gevura, severe judgment, in that of Kabbalah. So during this battle, Set does indeed gouge out the eye of Horus, tearing it into pieces. This catastrophic event symbolizes the victory of chaos over order, Isfet over Ma'at. So the left, we've already stated this with the left. Yeah, the right eye is the eye of Ra. It's associated with the sun, the masculine principle, and the unchanging divine light. That mirrors the Kabbalistic Tiferet, which is the heart. This is why you see the heart throughout this Ipet Goat 2 as well. In the left eye, the eye of Horus, is associated with the moon, the feminine principle, and the earthly realm of cycles, time, and hidden magic, which mirrors the Kabbalistic Malkut. And the Malkut as well is the it is the Sephira of Shekinah herself, which is the indwelling presence of God, in other words as well. So the idea is that the moon, because it reflects the light of the sun, again, we're back to the concepts here. We're back to the eye, not as a window, but as a mirror. That the moon must eventually realize, again, in some sort of transcendental way, that it is a self-luminary. It doesn't just reflect the light of the sun. That it itself is its own light. What this is meaning metaphorically is that the sun being the pure potentiality of all ideas, extant or dormant within potentiality, that ever could be or ever will be, that the moon must realize that it doesn't just reflect those. It doesn't just, this idea that there's nothing new under the sun, right? It doesn't just sort of recycle those, that it itself can transcend the encompassment of the sun, and of course become effectively its own god. This is the idea of the Homo Deus and things like this.
Wasn't there also a
Yeah.
correlation that one of the eyes was the moon and one of the eyes was the sun? Wasn't there also a correlation?
Well, the eye of Raz is associated with the sun, and the eye of the eye of Horus is associated with the moon. Is that I just stated?
Right. Okay.
There is something else within Kabbalah surrounding these eyes, and for the life of me, I can't recall it now, and I don't have it in these notes. But there's something in it in Kabbalah regarding this. But that's because a lot of what you see in Kabbalah and Judaism, even Hebrew as a language, there's a hell of a lot of loan words and loan concepts from Kemetic.
No, I was asking that because it's always the right eye. I mean, Odin sacrificed one of his eyes, and usually is depicted missing his right eye. And also, even in his supposed historical figures, we have here in Portuguese culture an historical figure, which again I think it's script, called Camões, that was supposedly our greatest epic poet. And he lost his right eye in a skirmish. I believe it was either Africa or India. I'm not sure. And he was able to save his greatest work because he was his ship wrecked, and he was able to save his greatest work by swimming with one arm and holding the book with the other arm. I mean, you can imagine, right? But it's always the right eye, right? And so this, again, we can interpret beyond the concept of what is given, not as an absolute, not as taking it as literal, but with the idea of dimming the sun, right? Dimming the inner sun, dimming the ego, dimming the individuality in favor of that, so you're blind to your individuality, and therefore you follow the external authority, be it of that construct of God, of an external God, be it whatever else, government, for example, kingship, whatever, right? So would that make sense? Because that's why I asked if it was always associated with, so the right eye was always associated with sun,
with
right?
the sun and the left moon. It's
Right.
interesting because this also ties in with Boaz and Yakin. So Boaz would be the moon, would be the left. Of course, that's known as Bina or Gevura, understanding and judgment, and Kabbalistic Sephiroth. And then the right would be mercy or Chesed, and Yakin, which may mean in Hebrew, he who establishes, so that which establishes things, as opposed to Boaz, which means strength, which is more of this. Again, it's a more it's a judger. It doesn't necessarily establish. It seeks to break down. So in that sense, for example, with the right, if the right eye was missing, yes, it dims the sun, but it's almost like what you're dimming is your connection to the world. That you're, again, if you were to think of this in a very dark enlightenment, quote quote dark enlightenment idea, that effectively, if you are fully of the left eye or the moon, you are dwelling within a place in which you believe yourself hubristically to be above God himself. But in a more positive way, if you're, again, as we see, if the child here, something else came to mind there, Jan Žižka, which was a Czech Hussite leader during the 15th century, the Hussite wars against the Catholic Church. I think he had lost his think he lost his left eye first, and then his right eye in 14. I mean, around about 1421, because that was nearing his death around about then. Anyway, it's the same sort of concept as this Odinic figure, right? And the reason for that is ultimately within the positive aspect of this. When you lose your right eye, you're dwelling in matter. You're taking the beatings, the bruises. You're, again, as you stated as well, you're almost you're relinquishing the ideas or the personas which are giving out, which are radiated out by the sun. You don't necessarily cling to the threads or the rays of fate provided to you by the sun. You sort of walk the drudgery. Again, similar to the ibis bird of Thoth, to put it in an allegory. The ibis bird walks around the swamp all day with its head down, and it has this beak that looks like a quill, or an old ancient Egyptian stylus. Hence, the ibis bird was associated with Thoth, or thought that god of messengers and wisdom. And it explores and walks around all day looking for these little pearls, these morsels of sustenance. And so what this implies is that if you take that left-hand path, in the more positive aspect of it, at least, what you do is you sort of take the burdens of the world, similar as to what we're seeing with the Christ in this figure, in this film. You take on the burdens of the world to thus understand the world. And by understanding the world, you understand that the world itself is a mirror of you.
Yes.
And you yourself are beyond this world. It's this sort of Gnostic concept. I hope I explained it correctly there.
Well, I understood at least.
Well, good. So that's sort of the connections there with that. It also relates to the Wadjet. The Wadjet is the sort of restored eye, which becomes it becomes a representation of the whole. It's also known as the green one, interestingly, and this was also associated with Thoth as well. So I'm just reading my notes here, see if there's anything else I can bring up. Yes, so therefore the healed eye of Horus is the ultimate Egyptian symbol of the tikkun, the cosmic repair and the sacrifice, the destruction, the gouging, the blood moon, which was entirely necessary for the healing and the eventual resurrection to occur. But again, this is also there's a positive and negative aspect to all of these metaphors, which is that one is of the cycles of power. This is how power maintains itself through a self-regulating system of great resets or permacrisis. There's also the positive or more individualistic aspect of this, which is that one wants to be effectively a better human being. One wants to... Yeah,
I'm sorry. Sorry, no. Well, I was just going to mention, to reinforce that, even in the Isis story, if you take the myth as it is, Isis reconstructed Osiris from the pieces as, in a bit of a way, as a Frankenstein monster, right? Because I believe she even asked Anubis for help, because Anubis is the skilled craftsman of death, right? So Anubis put together the pieces of Osiris and basically resurrected him as a Frankenstein monster made up of the pieces. So he didn't make him whole. He just, sewn it together and did part of his craft to for Osiris to resemble living again. But Osiris, from then on, if you look at it from that perspective, became not himself, not rebirthed himself as a whole being, but merely a representation made up from its pieces, right? You just glue it together. It's like you break a vase, and if you glue it together, even if you do it very well, you will always see the where the seams, let's say the glue was put, right? So it didn't become the full vase again. It didn't become the full being again, right? And so this is again a distinction, like you were saying, between even if it seems to be reconstituted, if it seems to be a rebirth, it may not necessarily be so, right? You may just be being sewn together by very psychological, agile, and dexterous hands, instead of actually bringing forth your full being that never died. It can't be touched, even, right?
And it's also the idea of the originals. So we're talking about
Right.
the realm of ideas, the realm of well, even the concept. The concept isn't necessarily the idea, but the original idea for if you will, these various archetypes, that they themselves fundamentally within the human experience are misshapen, right? It's the idea of the distinction between the subjective and the objective. That what we see within the objective fundamentally is mired and tainted rather by our perception, by the ideas that we hold, by or rather the concepts that we hold within our mind, right? These abstractions. This also, by the way, the fact that she couldn't find his manhood. What that indicates, again, back to the chalkboard, right? The dispensation of will. The idea is that fundamentally all of the cycles beyond the original, beyond the original universe or world or what have you, once that ended, that everything after that was merely artificial will. It was a world controlled and run by man.
Yeah.
It was a world of artificiality.
Yes.
So this is what this is indicating as well, right?
Yes.
And again, this relates back to what you were mentioning with the sword and the stone, Excalibur. There's other, God, even Muhammad's Zulkfahan. I think that's what it's called. The twin serpent sword. I mean, any sort of sword or spear or mythological weapon. This is, of course, pointed and shafted. Then that itself probably relates to this sort of patriarchal or masculine idea of the will, which would be the active intellect. I've wrote here as well this within the mythos, the Gnostic creation myth. I think this is from the Apocryphon of John, the Secret Book of John, as it's also called. Pardon. Within this mythos, the angel of light refers to the divine spark, the luminous power originally stolen by Yaldabaoth from his mother Sophia, and later infused with the epinoia, the luminous helper of light, to awaken humanity. Because the idea was that Yaldabaoth established a world that was just of clay, but it wasn't necessarily alive. It wasn't animate, and he didn't have that ability. So what he did was, of course, he enticed either the angel of light or Sophia to look into the reflection. Similar to Narcissus, you see this in the Hellenic mythos. And by that, they were captured. They were captured. Again, they're captured because it's the notion of the persona. The persona is the false ego. The persona is this mirror. But we believe it to be a window, right? So,
Yeah.
I think you've mentioned it before when we did a breakdown of John Milton's Paradise Lost. The notion of the shadow, which, the pride, which is the original sin, and then that of the shadow. So you have this same idea contained in that too. And fundamentally, what this is getting back to is exactly what we've been discussing up to this point. If you were to look at this in a material, mechanical, constructive way, the idea is that civilization itself is effectively a parasite. It's parasitical. All institutions, all mechanisms of power themselves have to be parasitical because they're based upon this, again, power itself, this artificial... Jump in.
Yes, Silas, but when we understand that the function of parasite is to consume that which is accumulated and that shouldn't be there, then that changes the perspective. You are correct, it is parasitical. But what is it parasiting? It is parasiting those that refuse to be individuals. Because when you become more aligned with your individuality, you still have to deal with the people around you, sure, but you yourself are not compatible with that parasitism. You understand? People talk about loosh and that kind of thing, right? You don't give away any loosh in that concept, you know. And so, what are the parasites doing? They are performing a function that people, whether they are aware of it or not, and of course, most of the times they are not, and they even see as a battle and an opposition, what they are doing is performing a service. In the same way that, someone you loved very much died, right? And after a while, you see maggots starting to consume the body. So the maggots are evil because they're consuming your loved one, right? No, they're doing actually something that is very essential. They are consuming a leftover dead organic body so that new life can come from it, right? And something will grow there, and other beings will rely upon that new life to give continuation, and so on and so forth, right? So the same thing with parasites. Parasites are there and exist to consume something that shouldn't be there, but that is compatible with them, right? If you don't want parasites to show up, don't be compatible with them. Don't have an accumulation of something that should have been thrown away. It changes things, doesn't it?
Oh, well, there's another thing I was going to mention there with the antimom, antimimom pneuma, which is this concept you find within Gnosticism, as it's called. It's effectively the counterfeit spirit, right? So it's sort of ties in with, if I picked you up correctly, it's the idea that we ourselves are almost it's self parasitism, right? Because we not even self, but what's the term I'm looking for? We gain something from the parasitism, right? We gain something that we feel we can't find otherwise. Again, you can look at this as well within the context of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and the Soma, right? We want to be put to sleep in a sense, or at least the majority do, because they don't fundamentally realize that the path of least resistance will lead them to the destination of most consequence.
Yeah. Let me try to simplify that. It's like with a more mundane example, so that it's more comprehensible. It's imagine that you eat too much, right? You eat too much, you will accumulate matter, stuff that shouldn't be there in your bowels, for example, right? Inevitably, unless you chemically prevent it, you will develop parasites. But the parasites are there not because they are evil and they're trying to live off you and that kind of thing. They are there to clear up the things that you yourself put there and left there to rot, right? So clear up the things that you left there to rot, become incompatible, and no parasite will show. It's like, I've said this example many times. You don't want, flies around your garbage can. Empty the garbage can, right? Throw away the garbage, get rid of it, and there will be no flies around the garbage can, right? So that's more or less the concept. If you were to treat the flies here as parasites, right?
That's both a sales pitch for Ozempic and ivermectin. It's the best sales pitch I've heard thus far.
Oh, man.
Jokes aside, though,
Yeah.
just to quickly run through the rest of these symbols. So, right, there's a connection as well between this notion of the light, which is the epinoia, which was stolen from the angel of light, or stolen from Sophia. It depends what really you're reading from the Nag Hammadi library. But funnily enough, when you look into Mark Twain's Mysterious Stranger, right, the mysterious stranger or Satan, he's also known as number 44. Why 44? Well, 44 is the Hebrew gematria value, and of course, gematria only works in Hebrew because it's the system is alphanumeric, meaning the letters are substituted for values or numbers. 44 is actually equal to dam in Hebrew. Now, dam is the word for blood, and it's stated in Leviticus 17:11 that, quote, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood." It's also stated in Kabbalah that nefesh is the lowest, most animating level of the soul, and hence it's the interface between the spiritual and biological, and the blood takes on this sort of carrier role as well, this bridging role. And the idea is in Kabbalah as well is that blood is the coagulation of light. So again, we're getting back to this counterfeit. It's the counterfeit light. It's the light sort of locked in matter. This notion, right? I'm not saying this is correct. This is just how it's viewed within the mysteries. Yeah. And interestingly, Dam and Adam are almost exactly the same. Similar to the golem. Of course, you have Emet or Amet and then Met. So if you want to activate it, you have Amet or Emet. The A, the alpha, you include the alpha there, or the Aleph, which is the beginning, the initiatory spark. And then you have, of course, if you want to deactivate it, you get rid of the Aleph. You have the same thing here with Adam and Dam, so blood and man. So the blood itself is innate, it's inert, without the Aleph, without the beginning spark, if you will, right? So it's almost relating to this concept that, in fact, Dam itself is this sort of artificial counterfeit light. Interestingly,
well, I think that we've beat our own record. We've spent an hour and a half on this frame.
Oh my god, yeah, we have. Jesus. Trying to see, and also
which is fine. I mean, whatever.
Also, the purple. I won't go into Botticelli, or you can also see she's on the shore there. There's also something to mention as well with basically this is the reverse. I see this as the reverse of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. So you see, if the Birth of Venus to the left of Venus, you see Caelus and God, what's the other? His consort. I forget her name now, but the idea is that is fire and air, and they commingle, and they blow onto her this sort of divine ruach or breath, the breath of life, right? And so the idea is that you're seeing the opposite of this. After the birth, after the beginning, the Aleph or the Alpha, you now see the Tav or the Omega, the end. And the end, of course, is the same as the beginning. It's done in violence. It's done, again, as we're born into confusion. The light of the bright light hits you, and you know not where you are, right? It's so it's a similar idea you see here. As above, so below, this notion, and also as well the purple. I don't know if you can see it, but that purple glass, that vial rather, that is the alchemical cucurbit. The notion is that it's with the explosion, the way it lines up there, it's almost similar to Athanasius Kircher's Pyrophilociorum. It is venting. It's like a volcano. It's venting out, right? And it's venting out the pressure of what? Well, of the alchemical magnum opus that you see throughout, all of the various colors and symbols throughout this image here. And the cucurbit, the reason it's hermetically sealed is fundamentally it's to retain all of the essences and to ensure all of the reactions occur within that enclosed space. Again, what do you see with civilizations come their end? They try to create urban sprawl to basically take all of the rural folk and to bring them into the cities. Why? Because the city itself is effectively, in this sense, in the civilizational sense, is the alchemical cucurbit. It's where the ritual of
The
death and
alembic.
resurrection
Yeah.
must occur. Alembic, exactly, yeah, alembic.
Mhm.
She's also got pi written on her face. I won't go into pi, but it relates to both the Tower Tarot card through the Hebrew of the Peh, which is the 16th letter, and the pi, pardon me, the pi is the 16th letter. So that would be the Tower card. So that's in Greek. And in the Hebrew has Peh, which is the 17th. That relates to the star. So it's this same concept of death, resurrection, judgment, these notions, right? Yeah, there's more to say on this, but we'll jump ahead.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you have anything to mention on that.
On this boy here,
Yeah.
the automaton,
Well,
because he's clear.
it might be a girl. I'm not actually quite sure.
Yeah. I don't know if it's missing the manhood of Osiris, but I'm being a bigot because you can be a man even without, right? Anyway, jokes aside, yes, isn't this a representation of the sort of mind-controlled slash automaton? Because of course the red eyes there, you have seen several instances of red eyes, all related to robots. The Terminator had a red eye. HAL 9000 had a red eye. Usually even the Cylons, if you remember Battlestar Galactica back in the day, and even the new new version, although the new version had a lot of different aspects, had red eyes in the machines. So I think that this, and even the way that the child moves, is sort of robotic, right? So I think that this might be, that the generations are being made into automatons by following that narrative, that script. And as can be seen, it sort of creates a gap with the previous generation. The other man there, a grown man, is trying to establish a communication with that child, and it seems that it's not working. But do you see any other interpretation? I'm sure you have thousands of notes on that.
No, not actually this one. No. I think it may relate to plate 10 of the Splendor Solace, and what you see with that is that the what's known as within the Splendor Solace is the swarthy barbarian, and of course swarthy is an old archaic term for source of one who is of black in complexion,
Yes.
and so he has dissected and chopped up the and obviously killed in the process that of this sort of white. I forget what the figure is now, but it's a fair complexioned figure, and he's holding this double-headed sword, almost like an executioner's sword. And what I think you see with this is, I actually see this as almost geopolitical in a sense. With the Splendor Solace, that entire thing, I think, is almost harkening back to this notion of the quote unquote barbarian, that eventually it goes on this sort of rampage of destruction. Those that sit on the hinterland of the empire, and eventually will totally devour the empire. Almost through historical enmity rising once again come the time of crisis. But what you see here, it's almost like the opposite of that. He pulls the bow away from it, right? The knot, the Piscean knot. This, which is the idea of, these vendettas that maintain the civil, I think, the civil wars within Africa, and these civil wars themselves are effectively introduced by Western, Eastern powers, the powers of civilization and empire, the great powers today, to effectively keep them in this state so they can siphon off their resources dirt cheap. And you also see this with wars in general, right? Everything, all of the various societies of the world must be maintained within war. And this is what empires tend to do at the end of their life cycle. So, for example, Europe is at war with Russia by proxy, of course, through Ukraine. Um, you see in the Middle East constant war. You see in Africa constant civil war everywhere. And of course, you're even seeing in Asia the beginnings of war in that theatre with Cambodia and Thailand. Myanmar is in a state of civil war, I do believe, right now as well. So you've
And the
got all of
building up and the building up of Japan versus China. Yes. Go on.
exactly. So
Mhm.
all of this is really designed, firstly, to bring about the technate, to bring about this sort of techno neo feudalism, this system of, again, as we would call it, the super blocks, the perpetual war of the future. And what this does is it artificially expends one's energy and keeps them distracted, chasing their own tail within this cycle of death and decay. And therefore, in the modern world, really, it's war isn't done vis-a-vis. It's not done for profit. Hell, it's not even done to necessarily strategically relocate populations through displacement or to specifically take down infrastructure and what have you. Really what it's about is just simply to make war. War in and of itself for power is a means in that regard. So or pardon me, is an end in that regard. So
Yeah.
what we're seeing is similar to what Orwell stated, is that the wars are waged not against the external foe itself, which is fictitious, it's an illusion, but it's waged against the domestic population, because the only way to maintain any hierarchical system is to ensure that they externally vent all of
Yeah.
their anger, all of their hate, so that of course that won't build up a bit like the cucurbit, right? It won't
Mhm.
build up, or Athanasius Kircher's Pyrophylaciorum. Um, but what you're seeing here, he is breaking the cycle. He's breaking that Piscean knot. Um, and again, the automaton of war, hence the red eyes, the sort of soulless red eyes, that ends. You'll also notice too the crescent of the moon there, which is similar to the blood moon tetrad in the eye, the right eye, which indicates that the cycle is about to end and a new moon is about to begin. I think that's a waning gibbous, is it not? So, and in its sides as well, you see this again, the birth canal concept, the opening of the mouth concept, and also the drought, the idea of drought. So it's further, it's given further inclination towards this being Africa, right? So
Mm.
in this sense, the cycles will end because you'll no longer have this sort of knot of recursive back and forth. The black and white will be done away with in a sense.
That's interesting. Show what happens when he knots that. Ah, it goes off. Okay, I understand. Okay. Yeah, I didn't remember that. Yeah, yeah, I
And
understand
it's
what you're
it's interesting as well that the one who pulls the knot away is firstly the man. He has I really can't see it in this light, but he has a sort of scar at his left hand side. So it's
Mhm.
perhaps he's missing his heart himself, and he's of course got the skull and crossbones at the other side.
Right.
Yeah, she is a woman here. She looks like she's got a pregnant belly, and you can obviously see the breasts there as well. So it is a woman, it's a female. Um, which again, that's interesting. I really don't have
Looks
anything
like a
to
child to
mention on
me.
that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's hard really to say.
Hmm.
This has always eluded me. This scene. The only thing I can really think of is the sort of geopolitical angle. But she's also got scratches and scars on her left hand as well.
I
I
think
don't
those
know.
are tattoos in a way, right?
They may be.
Hmm,
They may be.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, we'll continue on. There's also a
Uh-huh.
weird. It looks like an elephant down there, but really, I really couldn't make it out, to be honest. This scene always eludes me.
The communist. I always see this scene automatically as the communist because he's got the cycle and hammer, the hammer and sickle.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he's wearing that shirt that is very working class shirt, right? He looks like a working class. So this is like clearly a representation of the flooding of the communist leftist ideals in the narrative at the world stage. Now, what is it flooded with? I'll leave to your interpretation. I don't. I'm not going to risk here. Go on.
Well, the green itself is that of firstly, it's either the green agenda, which is sustainability and such. What this may be intimating, and remember, the guy who made this is a Canadian, so Canada, like of course Scotland and the rest of Britain, when we view the hammer and sickle, we almost view it as romantically associated with the working class, even though it's not. But the I think I'll give my general interpretation after this, but I think he's alluding to the idea that the working class, quote unquote, will be swamped, and even the global south of the working class. Hence why we see was it Juanito, which is a sort of derivative of Juan, which would be
Mhm.
John, I think, in English.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you see that he's being drowned by either bureaucracy or sort of sustainability in the green agenda, and that will stifle all economic activity of the working class. And of course, he's in total shock. He doesn't realize, how do I get out of this? It's almost the more he struggles, like quicksand, the more he is brought down. Another thing, this is my interpretation. The green itself is that of almost the soma of the spiritual unripeness. So, for example, the soma in our modern world is the digital screens, the even the smartphone, and all of the smart devices, and that has brought us into a sort of I guess you could call it electrochemical malaise,
Hmm.
in a sense. I think that's what it may be showing here as well. Funnily enough, as well with the hammer and sickle. So what most communists don't realize is the the individuals, the sort of thought leaders behind communism itself. Of course, Marx was the son of a rabbi. Um, it's all of it's Kabbalistic. So, for example, of course, you have the red. The red is related to this concept of blood, of sacrifice, of the of the sort of self-regulating machine of the world vis-a-vis permacrisis, this very Martian idea, and of course of Rubeda as well. And then you have the hammer and you have the sickle. So the hammer is that idea that we are metal, similar to the alchemical view of us, and we are being hammered into shape. We're being transmuted from lead to gold, right? Or from gold to lead, depending on your opinion. And
Yeah.
the cycle is the sickle, pardon, yes, relating to the cycle, is the idea that we are the crops. We are the crops that are harvested. And we are
So
separated out via
form,
yeah, jump in, sorry.
form and reap, right? Form into a shape and then reap. Yeah.
Bingo. Yes,
Mhm.
bingo.
Mhm.
That's it. That's
It's
it.
interesting. It's interesting to me that you see this color as green because to me it's yellow. Ha! Am I colorblind or something?
It's a palish yellow. Yeah, pardon me, it's a palish green. It's sort of yellowish green. Um,
Hmm.
I see it as green. Maybe I'm colorblind, mate. Or maybe I see everything as green. It's my favorite color. So, yeah. There's also something else to mention is that this individual is clearly South American. he looks South American. Of course, the name is Spanish as well. So there's this indication that is, what's being indicated here is the working class of South America. Now, again, if we go to the technate concept, which was heralded in the 1920s and 30s by I believe it was called Technocratic Inc. In North America. I mentioned this in my first book, but interestingly, everything that Donald Trump is doing, he wants to take over Greenland. There's even talk about, and by talk, I mean he's actually stated this in press conferences, about annexing Canada. And fundamentally, the Don Road Doctrine, as they're calling it, the Monroe Doctrine, which Don Roe is a sort of
Yeah, I got the reference.
yeah, meant to be a comedic variant of Monroe. The Monroe Doctrine was formalized, I believe, after the War of 1812, which was disastrous for the Americans, though they came out of it with a white peace. Anyway, the Monroe Doctrine was this view to keep out any European colonizing powers out of North America, to literally push them out eventually, and to establish the New World as a new world under, of course, the US, the US's hegemonic yoke. And so, effectively, the Monroe Doctrine, or the Don Roe Doctrine, is the notion that America will contract its territorial empire, and it will control the world vis-a-vis resources, and it will have total control over the Western Hemisphere. And by this, they will maintain their empire. Now, again, as stated, this has been talked about for years and years and years. But one of the main things you'll require with this is, firstly, you'll have to take out the communists, the communist regimes that are still extant in South America, or even any left-wing regimes. You'll have to put in, American puppets. Again, this is all sort of superficial geopolitical talk here, but you put in puppet regimes, you get rid of the communists, and of course you destroy the working class vis-a-vis, of course, unfavorable trade terms with the US. The US will effectively exploit, as we're seeing in Venezuela right now, exploit all natural resources in these given South American nations, right? And they'll do so, with basically, they'll do so unimpeded, effectively. So I think it's that idea that it's effectively talking to. Oh yes, and with the technate, the idea is that you will require these data centers. You will require a sort of techno neo-feudalistic panopticon style system vis-a-vis smart cities, a smart grid, a 24/7 surveillance system vis-a-vis smartphones and what have you, to fundamentally control this system, because most people will hate it deep down in their own soul. So you have to constantly surveil them and ensure that you can iron out any sort of chinks within within the system. So I think that might be what you're seeing.
I'm still undecided on what the liquid might represent, or what it might be, because, for example, it was very clear before that what was dripping into the water was oil, right? So the type of symbolism, when liquid is represented, seems to follow a certain literalism. So I'm wondering what this liquid might be, that is drowning, let's say. Yes, it can be, suddenly shifted into a symbolism, but it might be represented in the narrative as a literal liquid of some sort that is not oil. So oil is no longer the big thing, let's say, and it's replaced by this. But what might this be?
There's also another potential, which is well, firstly, it's the US dollar, the green of the US dollar, perhaps. Or it could be, right, like what we're seeing again with this geopolitical nonsense that's going on with Iran. What people believe was about oil fundamentally appears to be about corruption, right? It's about making money. So, for instance, you see that on the back of this US-Iran war, that Trump and his administration, they're stating that we want to expand the firstly the military budget. I think they're looking at was it 1.5 trillion or something like that. The problem is America's a very corrupt nation, like most of the sort of managerialist dictatorships of Europe. Thus, a lot of that money will be lost just as it goes, right? However, it could be meaning that that what we thought was about oil is in fact not. It's about the green of money, right? That's one potential. The green of money relates to corruption, essentially, spiritual corruption, the root of all evil. Or because this is after this nuclear explosion, quote unquote, and nuclear comes from the Latin for seed, interestingly, is that after nuclear explosions, so-called, they've stated that there's a thing that forms called trinitite, which is basically it's a sea of glass, right? This is what forms afterwards at the ground zero, supposedly. So this is a radioactive glass, and it's sort of this thin greenish color, right? So it could be that. It could be that. Of course, Louis Lefebvre is sort of pointing to, right? Again, I'm not necessarily saying we know
I'm still
weapons,
undecided, so I'll leave it open in the comments for people to provide hints of what this might be, this liquid, because I think if it is coherent, and it doesn't have to be with the previous representations, this seems to have replaced oil. In the previous scene where you see oil dripping, where Osama bin Laden is doing his kind of worship stance or whatever, what people, give me hints of what people might consider this to be. I would be interested in hearing what it might represent in the particular narrative of this animation. But for now, maybe we can go on a little scene ahead. We still have around 15 minutes or so. Yeah, Tiananmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tiger there, Tiananmen. So I think that this of course tries to link back to Tiananmen. It was Tiananmen, wasn't it? Where the
Tiananmen Square, yeah,
where the tanks on that. Supposedly, and that figure, that skeleton figure, is actually it reminds me of an old cartoonish figure that represented the dead in a video game from my childhood called Grim Fandango. Grim Fandango.
Yes. Yeah.
You know that one? About a Mexican guy that died, and he becomes a sort of Grim Reaper or something like that. Anyway, it was a funny video game at the time. But this could be that it's no longer through, because we've seen the let's say working class, even fighting working class, be drowned, and you have here a revolutionary standing in front of the tank, and the Grim Reaper says, you don't need to do that anymore. It's over. So how do you read this particular bit?
Well, similar to how you're reading it, this notion that this Baron Samedi, I view him as that. Samedi is the voodoo deity of basically death, the Lord of Death, and I typically he is the orchestra. You see later on, he is orchestrating this chaos. He's almost reveling in it, and what you're seeing, of course, even with the music as well, is it's starting to build up to a crescendo. And what this woman is attempting to do is she's attempting to almost impede, as you see the yin yang is being sort of taken away there. But the dot still remains. There's that dot again, right, of the symbolizing the esoteric sun of the soul. That she's trying to say, stop, hold on, stop, because you're seeing this sort of devourment of war, right? This and of course famine, as we saw previously. And what Baron Samedi is essentially stating is no, no, this has to occur. Similar, of course, to what you're seeing with the destruction of the destructive capabilities of a nuclear weapon, right? It's this sort of a Gorgon-like thing.
Yeah.
It's symbolic of total annihilation, total destruction. The city killer, as it's also called, right? It breaks forth the Kukurbit, back to that idea. And there's something else to mention with the tiger. Now, people have mentioned there's we probably won't go into this, but there's meant to be a connection in the fireworks with 28. Also, as well, because she has the tiger on her back, they're saying, well, when this all occurred, when this kicked off, the previous month, well, of course, in the Chinese calendrical system, was the month of the tiger, known as yin, right? You have the yin and the yang. I think yang is different from yin, but anyway, so that governs the period from the commencement of spring, which is Li Chun, roughly February 4th, until the awakening of insects Jingzhe or Jingjie, roughly March 5th, with the current temporal. These notes I made on March 13th. So with the current temporal date resting at March 13th, the threshold of the tiger had indeed just been crossed, which would, of course, transition into the month of the rabbit or the Mao. Interestingly, that relates back to the white rabbit, right? And to chase the white rabbit. Those are just interesting things to mention. The rabbit as well is related, and especially the white rabbit is related to the moon. It's God, I forget it's a constellation near Canis Major. I forget what it is now. And Lepus, which is the rabbit. So that's related to the moon. So you're seeing another relation to the moon here, which is the gateway of souls. It's also, as we stated, it's symbolic of us ourselves in this sort of state of spiritual evolution. If we were to look at this purely as a sort of Gnostic idea, you'll notice that he has, if I can pull it further forward, she's also dressed like Rosie the Riveter. What I see that as is this. What I think he's trying to intimate there is that this whole sort of, it's the word, that female empowerment, which effectively amounts to females acting like men as opposed to being truly feminine, in the modern world, that is ending. This Rosie the Riveter character, that's gone. Because, of course, the Kirkurbit is going to break apart, the city. So there's going to be a sort of archaeo-futuristic state. If we manage to break forth the knot and escape, this sort of cacophony of chaos doesn't result in the perpetuation of power, but it results in our transcendence from it. Again, like what we see with the Ludovic at the end, shaking off the demiurge, right? So as we see here, again, you'll see the green lamp there. You'll notice there. So that's a diamond he's wearing. Why the diamond? Well, how is a diamond formed? It's formed vis-a-vis coal. The coal is pressurized, similar to, again, the Negredo, the putrefactio, that sort of thing which is in the ground. It's in the lacuna. It's formed in the darkest depths of the earth. Again, this is all metaphorical for our own soul and spiritual evolution. Thus, he is sort of you could actually see him as an ancestor. He is the one who's went through this already, and he has spiritually transcended, right? But he's also indicating that no, you can't stop this. This has to happen. Either it will result in the perpetuation of the mask or the masquerade of civilization, or it will end in the transcendence of you, your individual soul, into a more,
Mhm.
let's say, evolved state, right? Um, she's also wearing the red belt as well. That relates to both Ophiuchus, where again the waist, we're talking about the scarab there, where the waste, waste, is processed through the waist or the bowel. Um, Again, very interesting. The sort of parallel homophones here with waste and waste. And then from that comes the serpent's caput, the reborn serpent from the worm, which, again, like the coal, dwells in the lacuna, creates negative space, dwells in the chaos, the abyssal waters, right? And then is sort of fished up vis-a-vis uh, this epiphany, if you will, this transcending epiphany, and then is reborn as the crowned serpent. It's that idea. It's also found, of course, in the zodiac. It's also found in the silver gate. Ophiuchus is the golden gate. It's found in the silver gate of Orion's belt as well, which is 3 in number. I don't know if you noticed as well. There was a trifold or trimorph found within the nuclear explosion. There were 3 rings on the outer edge.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, that ties in with that too. This sort of trimorph, trifold. I think we touched upon that in the first episode. So yeah, you'll know, right. So many
And the
people,
no nuclear, yes. So she has
yeah,
the anti-nuclear. Uh, 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 I don't know if it's a tattoo or whatever on her cheek with the heart on the other. Yes, this is a feminist. Yeah, I see what you mean.
and you'll notice as well that similar to the classroom, you'll notice that this goes from the top left down to the bottom right, harkening back to what we're mentioning with the 4 royal stars. This is again the sort of descent of man, as opposed to the other one, which goes from Aldebaran, which would be here, Aldebaran, up to that of Scorpio, right, where
Mm.
Ophiuchus is also found. Ophiuchus stands on the head of Scorpio. The idea is that man at that point ascends death. He's no longer terrified by death, or in the Kabbalistic or materialistic view, man actually becomes Homo Deus and escapes death through technological means. This is the Dark Enlightenment. But this is the Aquarius or Fomalhaut, the man, descending down into the world of the lion, into the world of predation, into the Regulus, the royal, uh, quite literally royalty. That's what it means, Regulus. So he descends into the world of hierarchy, into the world of the haves and the have-nots. And you'll also notice as well, the radioactive sign is actually a downward facing triangle, similar to the chalice or the womb. This itself is, in ritualism, it's basically channeling. You're channeling something down. You're channeling it down
Well,
into the earth. This
it can
notion.
be seen as pointing down and pointing up at the same time. It depends on which color you choose.
Well, yeah. The hanged man. Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Well done. Yeah. So it's a hexagram as well.
Right.
Well spotted, man. Well spotted. You'll also see as well. Um, I forget now. We're going to have to cover this in the next episode. But there's a reason for that, by the way. This blue or cyan blue,
I see green.
or green.
Is
Jesus.
it my monitor? I don't know.
I may have to go back to Specsavers then, man. Jesus.
No, I mean I'm not saying you're wrong. It could be
No, I'm
me.
I'm getting worried now. Maybe I am going. This is the start of my blind phase. Anyway, there's a reason for that. I think it's something to do with ISIS or what have you. But
Mm.
we'll touch upon that in the next episode. Anyway, as you see, she has the heart there again. Back to Tiferet. Tiferet is this middling process, almost like Ophiuchus, right? He is. We are man. We are both of the mutable and immutable. And the heart itself, once it becomes aflamed, lit with its own primal fire, as opposed to the Promethean fire of the external, it becomes in and of itself understanding of its own condition, and it can navigate the world better. And of course, if you, in the Gnostic idea, it can transcend the egg, can transcend the Leviathan, can transcend the world. It's consciously evolved in the Jungian sense as well. Another thing just to mention, as most people, I know people are going to mention this in the comments. These islands are, so that one there is Kesh. Interestingly, that is Kesh. It's so you have Kesh, you have Charnos, or Charkos. Charkos is the one to the north of Kesh. These are found in the Persian Gulf, and of course the US are talking about invading them, and that is Keshim, I think, if I recall correctly. So that's basically, those are the three targets for the US within the Persian Gulf, which is interesting, and they look almost exactly like them. And
That's a very interesting catch. Yeah.
This one here, this is, funnily enough, these look like two, because I have them in my notes somewhere, and I can't remember the names of the islands now, but they're found within the Caribbean, and they're very close. I'm not joking you, they're in the same shape. I don't know how the hell this, again, might have been random. It might have been this guy was injecting predictive programming into all of our minds, but it's in the shape of two islands that are basically the main islands in which, oh God, they're either north or south of, Greater St. James and Little St. James, the Epstein Islands. So that's also interesting. I forget the bloody names of the islands now. Anyway, I'll look them up for the other episode, and then we're going forward. So yeah, as you can see here, 28 people have noticed that. Of course, February 28th was the beginning of this war. There's also another thing to mention. There's also another numeral that's mentioned here as well. I think it might be 33 or something, but you have
It has to be. It has to be 33.
It has to be, yeah. But you have to take it maybe like 0.25 speed. Anyway, there's something to mention on the colors of these. I'll mention it later. But this is almost him blowing the shofar. Now, and of course, you see this within the Norse mythology. Heimdall blows his trumpet prior to the beginning of the Ragnarok, right? Which would be in Kabbalah the onset of the Tikkun, right, or of Armageddon, the Battle of Armageddon, the eschatology, the beginning, the end times. And so, effectively, what this is it's him indicating to her that this has to be, this is it, and it's this almost overpowering frequency of apocalypse and chaos that she cannot, she can't oppose it, right? Unlike the tanks. So she realizes, and you'll see her glum in a minute. And the reason she's glum is because she realizes the tanks, the material manifestation of chaos, which she could have stopped, that itself is actually just acting as a puppet for this, for something that's greater, for a greater force at play here. And also as well, it's indicative of the idea that the populace, as we've seen recently in Ireland, fundamentally have no power, right? And they have no power because what we're in now is we're in a sort of phase of exhaustion and decline, and people can't join together. They actually act as puppets, almost. They're disjointed, atomized, solitary units.
Well, if you remember a previous conversation, it was with Zeal that time, I think. My idea of of people protesting is a manifestation of powerlessness, right? Because if someone has power, they don't protest; they act on the power that they have and perform whatever needs to be done, right? If you protest for or against something, you are exactly showing that you have no power. And therefore you have to request, demand, yell, whatever, to get that thing done by the ones that do have the power to do it, right? So whenever you see these protests, this is not revolution, this is not war, this is a manifestation of powerlessness. And to participate in that is to tell yourself and to tell the world externally, to tell everyone else that you have no power. Even if you convince yourself that, no, I'm exerting my power, right? No, you don't. You're not, because you're demanding something that you can't actually do. Otherwise, you would have done, right?
And
So,
also
yeah,
tying in with this Baron Samedi character, if he is, again, as he wears the diamond, so he's been through this before, perhaps a quote unquote ancestor, if you will. So this spirit itself is almost indicating that to her, that fundamentally all of this is an illusion. This is what you're seeing throughout this. And this is what Louis Lefebvre even states himself with his Infowar interview, or alludes to it at least. And so this is an application of Sun Tzu's ultimate doctrine, which is the greatest victories to have are the ones in which require no battle.
yeah,
And so this also ties in with the tiger as well, right? The tiger is part of that sort of yang energy. It's the terrestrial power. It's even military ferocity as well, right? It's this view of active resistance, right? Back to Vivarium. If you have active resistance, if you're trying to dig your way out of this place, you're actually never going to find the bottom. You'll never find the
no,
way out.
you'll actually reinforce it.
Exactly.
You're
Bingo.
not just fighting, but whether you fight or you help build it, like we've mentioned in the previous episode, you are reinforcing the system itself. It's not a matter of battle; it's a matter of perception. Perception. That is the key
Mhm.
here. But anyway, Salis, do keep your notes for the next episode, because
Yes.
I have things that unfortunately I need to do now, and we've advanced not even 5 seconds. I mean, this time it wasn't even 5
No,
seconds.
we've actually advanced a fair amount, actually, I think.
You think so?
No, 20 seconds, maybe.
20. Oh, okay. I
Maybe
miscounted
20
that.
seconds.
Okay.
Maybe 20.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we need to wrap this one up.
Yep.
At this time, I have things to do now. But do schedule, and we'll soon record the next one.